During World War II, soldiers and engineers had to innovate under extreme pressure. Every battlefield introduced new dangers: machine gun fire, collapsing structures, poison gas, and, honestly, one of the most uncontrollable threats: fire. From fuel dumps to exploding shells to incendiary bombs, flame was one of the war's most efficient killers. Troops needed protection that was portable, fast to deploy, and durable enough to survive in brutal environments. What emerged from this demand was one of the strangest and most fascinating forgotten inventions of the era: the World War II fireproof blanket that could stop flames instantly. This was no ordinary blanket. It wasn't wool dipped in chemical retardants. It wasn't asbestos, which was commonly used at the time. Instead, war engineers created a textile that blended mineral fibers with a strange wartime resin that hardened under heat rather than burning. The result was a sheet that weighed surprisingly little but could smother fire so fast it stunned frontline observers. Some accounts describe soldiers tossing it over burning fuel cans or a flaming vehicle engine, only for the flames to disappear within seconds. Exactly the kind of field miracle troops needed when things went catastrophically wrong. The origins of this invention trace back to a small experimental materials unit within the Allied command. These teams were ordered to find new ways to protect supply lines against incendiary attacks. Air raids had proven that even small amounts of fire could destroy ammunition convoys, medical tents, and food depots. The engineers realized that they needed something that worked like a fire extinguisher but required no pressure, no chemicals, no maintenance, and absolutely no training. So, a simple sheet, something a soldier could throw in seconds, was honestly the perfect solution. The real breakthrough came when material scientists started experimenting with silicate minerals mixed into threads. These threads were then woven into fabric right alongside cellulose fibers. Normally, cellulose burns really easily, but when it was soaked in the experimental resin, the fibers totally transformed. When heated, the resin would crust over, starving flames of oxygen and forming a heat-resistant barrier. Unlike asbestos cloth, which relied on its heat tolerance, this new textile actively reacted to fire, sealing off whatever it covered. That reaction really shocked early testers. Many remarked that the material seemed to, eat the flames. Records show that field tests were conducted in North Africa, where fuel fires were, pretty common due to heat and sabotage. Soldiers reported that they could smother burning gasoline without fear of reignition. The blanket even survived direct contact with burning jerry cans, an impressive feat, honestly, considering how violently gasoline flames typically behave. One engineering officer noted that it worked so closely to instantaneously that it felt unreal, and that it saved more equipment than any fire extinguisher we carried. But despite its success, the fireproof blanket almost never made it to mass production. The resin, though effective, came with issues. It released fumes when heated, especially if the blanket was used repeatedly. The fumes weren't lethal, but they irritated the lungs and eyes during testing. The real problem was something else. The resin was unstable in long-term storage. Blankets stored for months in humid climates showed signs of chemical breakdown, releasing a mild acidic smell and becoming brittle. A war material that couldn't be stockpiled for long was a major logistical flaw. Even so, small batches were shipped to engineering units, mechanics, and some frontline units. They became especially valuable for vehicle crews who faced the constant threat of engine fires. Tank crews reportedly kept one folded on the turret floor, ready to deploy during emergencies. The blanket also proved effective in protecting wounded soldiers during chaotic evacuations when fires threatened field hospitals. Medical units draped wounded men with the blanket to create a fireproof barrier during rescue operations. After the war, for a brief period, a few companies attempted to create civilian versions of the blanket. These were marketed to factories, shipyards, and even households. But the post-war safety commissions had concerns. The resin was classified as, too experimental, not suitable for civilian environments, and the product disappeared from catalogs. The critics argued that while soldiers could endure the occasional resin fumes during an emergency, civilians shouldn't be exposed to potentially irritating chemicals. Manufacturers also struggled to reproduce the exact chemical formula, as wartime secrecy had kept the detailed composition classified. By the time researchers revisited the concept in the 1960s, interest had already shifted to other forms of fire safety. What makes this fireproof blanket especially fascinating is that, honestly, modern attempts to recreate it haven't fully succeeded. Modern fire blankets use fiberglass or wool coated in fire retardants. So, these are good, reliable, affordable, and safe, but they just don't behave like the World War II version. They don't crust over into a hardened shell or suffocate flames instantly the way the wartime prototypes did. Some modern fire researchers actually suspect that the resin formula relied on wartime chemicals that are now banned, making direct reproduction impossible. Another theory is that the high mineral content of the fibers was unique to the location where Allied engineers sourced the silicate material. Some suggest that the structure of the woven fabric was the real secret, something subtle about the density and geometry of the weave that allowed the resin to form a near-perfect oxygen seal. Unfortunately, without preserved samples, it's hard to know. Most of the surviving blankets deteriorated decades ago, victims of the same unstable resin that limited their wartime deployment. Still, despite its disappearance, the legacy of the World War II fireproof blanket remains. It represents an era when necessity forced rapid innovation, when tiny research groups created field-ready solutions in a matter of weeks, not years. It reminds us that incredible survival technologies aren't always mass-produced or remembered. They're often created, used briefly, and then lost to time. The fireproof blanket that could stop flames instantly is one of those forgotten inventions, brilliant, effective, and now a ghost of wartime ingenuity. If rediscovered or recreated, it could change modern fire protection completely, but until then, it remains one of World War II's most fascinating lost survival tools, a near-mythical sheet of fabric that tamed fire itself.